Whoa, who turned the heat up in here? Guys, man, can you believe how hot it is? It's like 90 freaking degrees outside. Welcome to the official start of summer. This podcast is sponsored by family, adventure, fun, and life. Would you like more of it? Continue to listen to this episode.
Dory 1, this is Fire Team Delta. Dad's coming home. Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Colloy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is Military Veteran Dad, and it's episode 125. Today's episode is with Jason Wood. He is a guy that had to reboot his life from the ground up, and he pretty much went all the way in and became a Forrest Gump, and just when he started running, he never really stopped. He rebooted his life from a single dad, broken relationship, and had to really figure out what was inside of him. And the journey in the mirror is something we've been talking about a lot over the last 2.5 years of this podcast. This episode, it paints why it's so important to go on that journey, because there is so much at stake when you don't realize what you're leaving on the table, when you don't look in the mirror and ask those hard questions. So without further ado, I'm just going to get right started with this episode because it's that good. If you want to hear about my big takeaway in the episode, hang on for the other side. Welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good times. I really enjoy doing this kind of stuff, so I really appreciate it.
Well, let's start off right out the bat. You and our friendship is just getting started because I saw you on Instagram and you posted a story about running. So tell us a little, before we go to your running story, tell us a bit about your military background and what your family life looked like right now.
Yep. So I'm a 7-year Army combat veteran. I got in back in 2004. I was an ROTC grad. So 9/11 happened. I think it was my sophomore or junior year of college. And so when I graduated college, I graduated in May of 04, and in October of 04, I was already in Iraq for my first deployment. And I did 3 tours to Iraq. I did 3 back-to-back 1-year tours. So 04 to 05, 06 to 07, and 08 to 09. And then served as officer, kind of had company command and all the good leadership positions that you want to kind of have. And during my military time, got out in 2011 after being an aide to a 2-star general. So that was a very interesting but a really rewarding experience. And then became a DoD contractor. So started doing that once I got out, and I've been doing that ever since. But as far as just kind of what life looks like for me now, it's primarily just doing the DoD contracting thing. I'm a program manager, project manager, working in IT program management. So do a lot of the information technology projects for the Navy right now. And then family life, it's me and my daughter. I am a single dad, but I do co-parent with her mother. And I think we do a pretty good job of it. I'd like to say that. So we have had for about half the time. Really enjoy my time with her. And then, other than that, you can find me probably out on the trails or out on the road running around or in the gym. That's pretty much my life.
Awesome. What year did you become a dad?
2014. Yep. She's 6 now. She'll be 7 in this coming September.
So that was on the other side of the military, if I understand your timeline correct?
Yep. That was on the other side of the military. Yeah. I think, my relationship with her mother started as soon as I got out of the military, and then had her a couple years later.
So take us to that moment you found out you're going to be a dad. Was that something that was like a scary thought, or is that one of those like exciting thoughts because you'd want to be a dad for almost all your life? Like everybody has a different kind of becoming a dad story.
Yeah, I think for me at first it was kind of scary, to be honest. I think during that time, I think I had gotten out of the military just a few years prior, and I'll say, just be very blunt, my emotional IQ was probably very low at the time. And so, I kind of had recognized that about me and understood that I probably wasn't the most loving, caring, gentle type person. in the world. And so it definitely was kind of scary. And her mother is a daycare provider, and she works around kids all the time. So she was very well prepared for having a child. But as far as I went, it was scary, and I didn't really know what the path ahead of me was going to look like. And that was, and I'm very much a planner and like to have things kind of in an orderly fashion. And that I guess, inability to really understand what was going to be ahead of me was definitely scary.
I can imagine that. And even just going to Iraq those 3 times, and I mean, being a planner in those modes, I mean, like, you're trying to engineer survival, and you want the same feeling that you're going to becoming a dad, but there is no way and no certainty for that feeling while you're waiting for her to come into this world. And then when she comes into this world, then you realize there is no manual, there is no certainty. There's only your best every day and picking yourself up when you don't. You mentioned a word that I want to go back to, EQ. Was that a word in your vocabulary? Like, did you know that you didn't have a high EQ? Or was it something that was like a moment that someone like, you really need to juice it up a little bit because there's more to life than just being this program planner?
Yeah. And honestly, the kick in the butt was honestly when my daughter was probably a year and a half or 2 years old. And when me and her mother split, and that was my kind of, come to Jesus, look in the mirror moment for myself. After we split, I kind of had kind of a decline emotionally and physically. I gained probably 50 pounds, probably about 40 or 50 pounds overweight. I was kind of a mess, just mentally and physically. And so it took a couple months, and then kind of had that wake up moment. When my daughter's sitting on the floor, she wants to play, and daddy's just, a mess. And so I remember going up and looking at myself in the mirror and just being like, you have to do better. You have to figure this out, and you have to pick yourself up and move forward. And from that point on, I remember finding a Spartan race near me, which was kind of my introduction back into, getting physically fit and being in shape again. And then really just started having conversations with people and started having, seeing a therapist and talking it out and doing those kind of things that helped me through and helped me recognize, that I didn't have it all figured out, and that I needed to not only work on the physical, but also needed to work on the mental.
So how old was your daughter in that moment? Because there's going to be some irony here that I recognize in my own story. So I wanted to know how old she was.
Yeah, she was about 2.
Yeah. So in my story, right, I was turning 30, and I remember going into my daughter's bedroom one night and looking at her in the eyes while she was sleeping. And I was like, how can I lead you into your life if I can't lead myself through mine?
Exactly.
And It was a really crappy question. It doesn't have any good answers. It's kind of a rock bottom type question. And the crazier part is you talked about having conversations, which is something so level 1.0 that we almost overlook it as something that can actually change us. And for my story, someone came into my life and gave me the question, if you want a result in your life you've never had, you need to do something you've never done. And for me, that was friends. And I was like, why don't I have friends? And I was like, well, every person you talk to is a high school girl that said no, and you've avoided that feeling since high school. So you just don't re-experience it. And I was like, well, that's a stupid reason. And so I started like, okay, let's do this. And then it was dads at the park that I always wanted to talk to them, but I was always too afraid. Like, they just probably want to play with their kids. They probably had a long day like I did. And then one day I just said to hell with it and said hello. And then turns out we were both just playing chicken. And then I just started learning that conversations like, wow, if you can actually exercise something that's inside your head and you can get clarity on it, and they can reflect back things that you don't actually know about yourself. And it's like, wow, what a crazy, like, it's interesting how we both have that same like Genesis moment where we realize how to lead ourselves. But at the same time, like, it's a hard moment you have to get to and realize that like you can't lead your family if you don't know how to lead yourself. And even the way you said the mirror, like I classify my journey as the mirror, like looking in the mirror and like, what words do you describe? And it was weak, pathetic. And until you change those words, nothing changes. And
Exactly.
nobody else affects those words. Like, you are saying those words to yourself. It's not your relationship. It's not your coworkers. It's not your boss. You're doing that. And that's where the real change begins to happen.
Yeah. And it was one of those moments too, where I think, I remember speaking with my ex, she was like, what can, how, it was a couple years later after that. And she said, why couldn't I have made you as happy as you are now during our relationship? And really the blunt answer to that was, anybody, you could have done anything and it would not have made me happy, because I couldn't make myself happy. The relationship with myself was just so bad at that point and damaged that I until I could make myself happy and start identifying with who I was and using those words and pronouns that to describe yourself, and adjectives to describe yourself as the person you want to be. You can't lean on other people to try to do that and be the Band-Aid for you. And so that's kind of where I was at. I was sulking and kind of just damaged myself. And it could have, nobody could have done anything at that point in my life to kind of raise me up. And I knew I had to do it myself.
And it's difficult to give something that you don't have for yourself in a relationship. And when I was looking in that mirror in that relationship and changing those words, there was something that hit me, that you can't unconditionally love others until you unconditionally love yourself. But you actually have to love not just the good parts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, you've got to find the love for 3 combat tours in Iraq. You've got to find the love for 11 years in the Army. You've got to find the love for having your relationship end with your biological daughter's mom. And you have to find the appreciation in that to really recognize that this is who I had to become, and I had to go through all of that to get there. It sounds short, like we just talked about in 5 minutes, but that's 4 years of my life.
Yeah, exactly. It's not overnight. And that's something that I try to describe to people is that transformation doesn't happen, over a week time frame. It takes a lot of work. And it's still, to this point, it's every day. How can I better myself, and what can I do to help be a better man and a father to my daughter? So it's an everyday thing. It never stops.
And to take that journey in the mirror one step further, this fall, I'm speaking at a keynote for Stay-at-Home Dad Con. So it's a big convention, 200 dads that are stay-at-home dads. And you can imagine already, the rewire from purpose-driven from work to purpose-driven as a provider in your home. It takes a lot of rewiring, and there's a lot of dads that can get lost in that same journey. And those aren't even veterans, but so many more men need that message of starting in the mirror. It's not just a veteran thing. It just kind of gets magnified because we got a lot more stuff to get through. Yeah. And sometimes we can hit bottom faster because we're holding on to a lot more and the dam breaks a lot quicker. Yeah. But man, it's such a big journey when you look in the mirror and be like, what words do you see? Because that's the problem, not anything else.
Yep. You're exactly right. Yep.
So you do a lot of good things with running, and that is something you use almost as a form of physical therapy on yourself. Tell us a little bit more about how running came into your life and what it does for you now.
Yeah. So, like I said, it was right after me and my ex had separated, and a couple, I had gained probably 40 or 50 pounds, and I was just in bad shape. And I can remember seeing a Spartan race on a Groupon deal. And it was here in Virginia, about 3 hours away. And I said, you know what, let's give that a shot. And so I bought the Groupon deal and decided to right around the same time get a membership to the local gym here, One Life Fitness. And
at least you were dumb enough to try to think you could do a Spartan without actually training for it.
Yeah. So I remember, and I come from, the military background, obviously physically fit, physical fitness is a big thing. And then I was also a collegiate athlete. I played football in college. And so I had that background, and I wanted to kind of get back to that and be somewhat competitive again, and have something to train for, not just, go to the gym every day and do curls for the girls kind of thing. So I remember getting on the treadmill there at One Life, probably about a month or so before that first Spartan race that I did. And I probably did a mile in 15 minutes or something. I struggled. And so then I just kept at it, did that first Spartan race. And Spartan races, the finish line is kind of a fire. It's a fire jump. You jump over this, they got wood out and they have a fire kind of pit that you jump over to finish the race. And I remember jumping that, crossing the finish line, and then feeling like I was going to die. Like it had been one of the toughest things
like
I
you
had done.
spent everything you had on the inside, just like what the people in the military told you when you were running. Like, you got to cross that finish line with nothing left to give.
Yeah, exactly. And
you're not puking. You didn't do it hard enough.
Yeah, I remember laying there on the ground over in the festival area after the race and just being kind of completely spent. At that point, it had been one of the tougher things I've done in my life. I mean, race wise, but I just remember falling in love with it at the same time, like that feeling like that I just exhausted myself and had really pushed myself to the limit for where I was at that point, not only just physically, but mentally as well. I mean, you go through that race and there's times where like, I was like, why am I doing this? Why, let's just hang it up. Let's just walk the rest of the way or something like that. Or, so I kind of fell in love with it. And then I started doing more and more of those Spartan races. So I started kind of traveling around to local races that were around. And I found myself losing weight by training and getting better in better physical shape. And then I started meeting people out at these races and that had similar mindsets. You meet, a lot of veterans that do these kind of races. And, what I started to find was not only was I kind of given the physical side of me the therapy it needed, but I was also getting the mental and the relationships with other people, that brotherhood and sisterhood that, I was kind of missing and probably likely craving from my time in the military. I was finding like-minded people that had goals and dreams and were pretty much doing the same thing I was doing out there at these races. And so you started developing these friendships and started being able to practice what we talked about earlier, just those conversations and talking to people. And then I remember by the end of that year, it was 2017 was that first Spartan race. And by the December of that year, I did a race down in Florida near, Tampa, Orlando area. And I did it was my first time racing what was called the elite division, which is a lot of guys that are sponsored and do these things on a regular basis. And I ended up finishing in the top 20 for both races. One was a beast course, which was about a half marathon race. And then the next day was a sprint, which is like a 5K type race. And I finished in the top 20 both of those days. And I said, you know what, if I really dedicate myself to this, I could probably do something. And so the next year,
does that type of mindset call you lazy?
Yeah.
Like, only if I've done all these big things, and you're like, only if you really tried, you would do it bigger. Like, it's a crazy moment to be in. Like, to think like, how would I even imagine that being lazy?
Yeah. No, I just, and so the next year, 2018, I came back and I started really kind of dedicating myself a little bit more to training and eating right and doing all the things that I saw a lot of these other guys and gals doing that do these races. And so I started finishing, my finishes got a lot better. I started qualifying for, national and world championship type races. And so, at that point is when I started to pick up, sponsorships. My Instagram started to grow a little bit. So, it became kind of and that wasn't my full-time job, but it became kind of a second job, another, form of work for me. After a while, it just became like another career. And to be honest, this one was one that I was more passionate about and definitely more.
Juiced you up. It brought more to the surface of who you are.
Exactly. And so started doing that. And then, like 2019, again, did some more and again, more races and qualified for more championship type races. Then 2020 hit and it was one of those things where races were getting canceled all over the world and nobody was doing anything. And then, so I just started, running a lot. I mean, the gyms were closed. So I just found myself out just running around. And then Memorial Day.
You don't feel like Forrest Gump?
Yeah, I mean, legitimately.
One day I just got up and I started running and I didn't stop.
I remember it was Memorial Day of last year, just to kind of give myself a challenge. I did, let's see, the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, I ran a mile as fast as I could. And I broke the 5-minute mile for the first time in my life. I ran a 4-minute, 58-second mile on Saturday, which was awesome. I was excited about that. So the next day I was like, well, let's see. I ran the fastest mile I've ever done in my life. Let's see if I can run the most miles I've ever done in my life. So that Sunday I ended up doing a 50K. So a little over 30 miles, in the neighborhood, just running as far as I can around, town here. And did that in about 4 hours and 20 minutes, something like that. So pretty competitive time for a 50K time. So I was like, oh, okay, that was a lot of fun too. And then I came the next day on Monday. I did, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Memorial Day Murph, the Murph exercise. Yeah. So I did Murph that Monday and then completely destroyed myself that whole weekend. But it was, it kind of, it was something that during COVID, it was a challenge. And then I caught the ultra running bug, and I had always sworn to myself I would never do an ultra race. And October of last year, I ended up doing a 13-hour, do as many laps around a 3-mile, 4-mile trail as you can in 13 hours. And I finished in second place and ended up doing almost 70 miles in 13 hours. And so obviously I crossed the finish line after that, and I said, well, what's next? So I ended up.
You had almost the Olympic gold medal mindset of like, I've reached the top here. What do I do next?
Yeah. So what's next? So the next thing became, for me, 100 miles in less than 24 hours. And so I recently, three or 4 weeks ago, did that at a race where I did 101.25 miles in 22 hours and 29 minutes. And so that checked that box. And then this coming September, I'll be traveling out to Africa and going to Tanzania and climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And we will be attempting what's going to be called the world's highest obstacle course race. So it's a world record where we'll climb Kilimanjaro, go down into the crater, and then do a 100-meter 10 obstacle course on top of Kilimanjaro. And then we'll race down.
That up. Like, you've got to live in a completely different world to wake up one day and be like, we're going to do this. And there's going to be other people that do it with us.
Yeah. So I've kind of always got that what's next mentality, I think. And after I finished the 100-mile race, I started getting questions about, well, what's going to be next after that, all that. And so now I'm already thinking about the Moab 240, which is a 238-mile race out in Utah, maybe doing that next year or something like that. So we'll see.
And what I want to just highlight, because I've talked about it on the podcast, but I want to just highlight, because you're almost like a perfect poster board for it, is how a single hello can change your life. Like, I truly believe you're always one hello from changing your life, and you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And for you, you didn't even know that this world even existed until you started asking questions and having better conversations. And you just continue to open yourself up. I didn't know there was this ultra thing in the Moab in Utah, but now I know. And because of this conversation, there's so much world and potential. We just don't let ourselves feel it or get access to it because we are afraid to say hello. And you mentioned about the brotherhood and having that connection, on the other side, and craving it. We know what it means to be a part of a unit in the military, but we really don't know why it's important. They don't really do a good job saying, this is an important life skill for you to recreate on the other side, because for millennia, we've been doing life together as a community, and you should never try to figure out how to do it alone. And there's a reason why biologically we've always done life together with other people in a community, because your life's going to give you more than you can handle. And you need to be able to share that load when it happens.
Yeah, exactly. And so the other thing I've done since I've gone through everything I've gone through since I got out of the military and then gone through the separation and everything, was I started up until last year, obviously, started traveling a little bit more and getting out and not doing sandals resorts type trips, but doing things with an organization called Wine to Water, where I've been to the Amazon jungle a couple years ago. And then we went to Nepal back in 2019. And kind of what you're alluding to, you talk about, people doing, people in community for years and years and years. When I was in the Amazon jungle, we were, disconnected from the world. It was the greatest 10 days of my life, completely disconnected. We're in a village in the Amazon, right off the Amazon River. And I remember talking to one of the villagers there, a female, and she, we asked her, very simple life, not much to speak of when you talk about material things. And we asked her, if there's anything you could have in this world to make your life better, what would it be? And she said, nothing. I have everything I need. And what she was really referring to was that sense of community she had. When you looked around, that community, they were all bought into helping each other and making sure each member of that community survived and was able to have everything they needed to, raise their children, do everything they need. It was just one of those amazing things, experiences that when I came back home, it's much like, when you come back home from a deployment, you look around, you wonder
why see life the way that you've seen it. And it's like,
exactly.
When you wake up, you're like, I mean, I know when I coach dads, I'll tell them like, hey, look over here. And then they're like, wow, was it always this? It looks like a frat party was in here last night. And you don't really realize that because you're walking around with blinders on. But then the moment someone says like that, when you go down there and you see all that, you're like, you witness more of what people are holding back in life, because you know what really is you're capable of, especially even just all the stuff you've done. Like, I feel lazy just sitting here listening to it. And the one question I was thinking, though, as I think it is almost probably your kryptonite, how do you slow down to be dad? Because dad is a moment by moment thing that you can't really do like what's next, because it's not about you, it's about them. So how does that convert as a dad?
Yeah. So the biggest piece of advice that I've gotten from other dads is to be present. Like, in the moment you have your children, be present with them. Don't have your phone, don't be stuck on Instagram. When you have your child, be with your child. And so for me, it's, she has school, she has her time with her mother as well. So that gives me opportunities to go out and train and do the things that I need to do. But when I have my daughter, like, it's my daughter time. Like, I can probably count on less than one hand. So like probably 2 or 3 nights that I've ever asked my mom and dad to watch my daughter or have somebody babysit her. It's just, I value that time too much with her. And so I think that's the big thing for me, is just being present when I do have her, and being able to be attentive to her needs and talk about what, she's experienced in her life, and then try to share, any pearls of wisdom that I have with her. I mean, she's only 6 at this time, but she's watching, and kids watch and learn by what you're doing. And so, I try to be that good example, and, and I try to listen to her and let her have feedback and talk through things with me. And so I just try to do that as much as I can. And so those are the moments where I do definitely slow down and just kind of enjoy the moment.
Was that hard at first, knowing what you were trying to do in the other area? Or was it kind of like, because you kind of were more in control of who you were, that it was easier for you to slow down?
I think at that point, like, I think I'd grown into a point where it was easier for me to slow down. At first, it was definitely difficult trying to go to the gym and train and work my 9 to 5 and then be dad on the other side, while still trying to really focus on myself. I think those first couple of years were really difficult, of me trying to find myself and what I enjoyed and who I was as a person. And that process of falling in love with myself, those first couple of years were tough, because I'm trying to fall in love with myself while still raising my daughter and do all these other things. And then so I've been single, for lack of a better word, for 5 years now. And I think over that time, it's really just become more of me and her against the world in a lot of ways. And so it's much easier now than I think it was at the very beginning, when everything kind of started, when everything hit the fan at the very beginning.
Yeah, we're definitely in a different time than we were even last year. So raising 2 daughters, there's a couple of different things that I often think about. And so mine are 6 and 4. So I've got one where I'm like at the edge of the R&D lab, and the other one at the bottom of the R&D lab. So she kind of gets to experience all the big lessons learned. And just kind of having those conversations, like I do what I call bedtime talk, where we're just sitting down talking about the day, talking about a story, rehashing something that went wrong. rehashing something went right, talking about my story or whatever it is. Cause it like between like 6 and 10, the playground issues start, trying to find popularity on the playground starts, like life problems just kind of pick up the pace. Now they're problems, but to them, this is the world. This might as well be no different than you having a pile of emails to do. It's the same amount of anxiety and stress. And I love what you said of just like guiding her moment by moment, because a lot of it for me, when I think of my daughters, is just helping them understand how they fit into the world and understanding that their value does not come from likes on Instagram, that no one else needs to give you permission to feel like my single like lowest barrier of success as a dad is if she knows that Instagram does not determine her worth, I've won. Everything else I can get a little bit wrong, but to me, I want that to be 100% right, because that is like, I feel like so much where girls go into the world and they look for that external validation, and it just messes up the wiring from day one. And it never comes. And if it does, it's usually always in the wrong way, and it ends up going in places you don't want to go. So, and the other part you're doing very well is you're actually giving her the model of what a man looks like. And the other idea that I often talk about is the dad at the shotgun at the door is the dad that set the bar low. So like your bar is going to be extremely high. And while you may not like the first one or the second one she brings home, she'll always come to the logical conclusion like, yeah, this guy's not my dad. He's hitting to the curb. And you just got to trust her because you knew how you lived your life, like self-leadership within yourself. And that she'll look at that model and understand what does real masculine love look like? Because you're the first love she ever had in her life. And she's going to use that to model every other love that she brings into it.
Exactly. And so that's why, our routine, I have her every Friday night, and every Friday night is daddy-daughter date night. And she gets to pick the restaurant we go to. She gets to, plan it out, and we go do it. We go, out to the restaurant. She gets to go look at a menu and pick her a meal out. And then we have the conversations, and, I do things. I open the doors for her. I do the things that I would expect another man to do for my daughter. And I want to be that example, and I want to be able to provide that example to her. And I talk about this as well because a lot of single dads are looking to get into relationships and what that's going to look like. And so one thing that I do say for the dads that are looking to get in relationships is you shouldn't be looking for another mom. In most cases, I should say. They already have a mother. You need to be treating her mother well, or their mother well.
Because that relationship is just a model of an example of like, she's still the mother of your child, and she's going to look for that example. And yeah, that's so important too.
Yeah. That relationship, I mean, being able to still have that relationship and be adult about it. And not, I see a lot of childish, behavior between a lot of parents in most cases after splits, and it gets the child involved, and it becomes a mess. And fortunately, me and my ex decided, that was not going to be us. And we took a very adult approach to the way we were gonna handle the separation, and then the way we were going to co-parent. And so she knows that I still care for her mother very much, and that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure I take care of her mother. Because at the end of the day, if I make sure her mother's all right, and I make sure her mother's taken care of, then that ultimately means I'll have a happier child. I think that it's a second and third order effects there that a lot of people I don't think really think about when they have those relationships. And then
because they're usually digging into the demons of their own past and looking at it through a fractured lens, and have 1,500 cataracts that prevent them from seeing truly what's in front of them versus their own internal BS that you spent that time working through.
Yeah, exactly. And then just for future relationships, anything past that, it's I don't need somebody to come in and be mom. I need somebody who's going to come in and be another strong female role model for my daughter. It's another strong example for my daughter, and then be somebody that I can show my daughter what a loving relationship looks like on a day-to-day basis. How a man should treat a woman, and what love what that kind of love looks like. So that's really, I think, the kind of things that my expectations for future type stuff looks like, with regards to relationships and the way she's going to view them. So it's a lot there to think about and work through, but I've had 5 years to do it.
And you know what, when you said 5 years, the part that like hits me as well. So I'm 36. And when I had that question, I was 30. when I think of all the things that I've done in only 6 years of my life, I don't believe it myself. Like, I'm sure you don't believe it either. Like, to go back and think like, man, how could that all that happen in just a short 5 years? But then you also realize when your kids grow up, you're like, how did this happen in 6 years?
Yeah.
How did my daughter go from this to that? And like, I thought we were just in diapers. Like, when did someone turn the lights on? And like, now it's some completely different stage that we think like there's this permanence to the feelings that we feel, but it's really not. In a short amount of time, you can make some big exponential changes and be a completely better, not different, but better version of yourself. And I mean, I've heard it said that the idea within marriage is you want to be the version of yourself you could live with the rest of your life. If you focus on that journey, you'll usually end up in the right spot.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yep.
Well, Jason, this interview has been absolutely just as good as I anticipated when I was checking out your Instagram. So you did not disappoint. Where's people can go ahead and find you and follow what you're doing with what you got going for running going on?
Yeah. So my Instagram is at @JFloydWood. So JFLOYDWOOD. So that's primarily what I use and for everything. I don't have really any of the Twitters or tickety talks or any of those kind of things. I just kind of deal on Instagram at the moment. I try not to.
I feel like it's hard going on TikTok. Like I have a hard time just even sitting there watching it, figuring out what I could do on TikTok. Like I just feel like, well, that's 15 minutes I'm never getting back in my life and it's gone. Like I feel bad contributing to it if I were to try to create a TikTok.
No, yeah, exactly. But my daughter's at the stage, she's 6 now and she wants a TikTok and it's like, we'll talk about it. So yeah. But that's definitely where
we'll practice doing Instagram Reels, which is in my domain.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. I know this episode is going to bring a lot of dads home because we hit into some big, deep areas. And I hope I can catch up on the running component because that's been something I've been working at, but now I feel lazy and not moving fast enough. So I definitely need to pick up the pace.
Oh, sounds good. I really appreciate you having me. And it was a great conversation. And really, I look forward to continuing our friendship.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. You might have heard that my voice sounds a little bit different today. It actually worked out for a great sponsorship because I feel like my good baritone voice really brought the heat on that sponsor in the beginning. But I unloaded hay with my dad for the last 5 days on the farm, and that always messes with my allergies. And we've also got a cold going around the house right as school wraps up and summer begins. So not the best thing to have. But nevertheless, that is how the cookie crumbled in my life, and I'm making the best of it. And you got a good sponsorship, low baritone voice out of this episode, which I normally have, but I feel like this episode really allowed it to come home. This episode really, really, really taught me a big, giant lesson. That we have to be hungry. We have to really be hungry to create the change in our life that we really want. When you hear what Jason was able to do through the pit that he was standing in, the pile of shit that he was sitting in, all of that. He rewired his life to something that I actually can't even really fathom what his life looks like on a given week because he's living a level that I can't even imagine. While getting this episode ready, I had to Google Spartan races. I'm like, is there a Spartan race? Because I feel like I got to get in this race and do. And it was actually something I was going to do about 2 years ago, but the world didn't work out the way that it needed to. And now I'm like, I wonder if this is the sign that I need to bring this back in my life in 2021. So I'll keep you posted if I find a way to make that work and how I can get it to make happen. But this episode just taught me how much you can really get when you really ask the hard questions and do the real work. You might have listened to this episode and felt like lazy like I did and been like, man, I am just not asking big enough questions. I am not meeting big enough people, and I'm not inspiring a big enough change inside my life. And I hope that this episode really cracked it wide open to get you to ask better questions, to get you to look for bigger answers and figure out how can you be that answer in many cases for someone or even yourself and show up how you're showing up for your kids. This episode painted it in a great way of when you really execute where you think you can execute, you can do big things. And if you think you can and you think you can't, you're both right, as Henry Ford said. And I think that this episode and that quote go hand in hand. Because where you think you can go is really limitless. And Jason Wood's story really paints that picture of no matter where your story is and how it's unfolded, you can take it anywhere, and the only person stopping you is you. So guys, that is this week's episode. I hope it helped you just as much as it helped me. And I'll see you on Friday.